Hello and welcome to another of our regular catch-ups, the Crypto Club and Digital Assets weekly catch-up on Zoom. It is Sunday the 23rd of March 2025, and as is always the case, no idea what we're going to end up talking about. Could be blockchain, layer 1, layer 2 solutions, could be different types of crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano. Could be talking more general things about regulation, intersection of AI, metaverse, NFTs, ICOs, SCOs, TGEs, or any other three-letter acronyms, really. If all of this makes sense to you, then do come along and join us in a future session. And if it doesn't, even better, stick around because hopefully it'll be something for you to learn. These sessions are open to everyone, novice and expert alike, and the conversation's driven by the people who come along. Some weeks we'll have presentations from people who want to talk about their projects, where they get their gone in 180 seconds session, which is where they get to talk about what they're working on. They have 3 minutes without the aid of PowerPoints or slides or demonstrations, simply to talk about what they're doing, and then for us to ask questions afterwards. So hopefully something for everybody. Do hope you enjoy it. Click on the like, the subscribe, even better, come along to a future session. So with that, let's see who's going to come and join us this week. Gabriella, good evening to you.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, and hey, Stuart. And we've still not changed our time zone in the UK yet. And you're on mute, I think, Stuart.
Unmute, yes. My wife likes me that way, muted.
It's an upgrade. Excellent.
Yes.
Oh,
Right.
we've got
Annie. Is it the?
Go
Sorry, is it last Sunday, next Sunday that you go to summertime?
Yeah, it's on the 30th, which I think is next Sunday.
Sunday. Yeah.
So I'm guessing that next week will still be. I can't even remember. Will it change?
Summertime.
It'll be in the early hours of Sunday. Yep. So Sunday will be against the new time. Well, when you join us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It gets so confusing, this stuff, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
And Annie's joined us as well. Hello, Annie.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
And we've got more and more people joining us now. Oscar as well. Hello, Oscar. Is it Oscar? Yeah. Oscar's trying to hide his camera. This is always a fun thing. Hey there.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey, joining us. You can have your camera on if you want, as long as there's nothing embarrassing to see. It's not a problem. It's always nice to see people's faces.
Yeah.
And equally, at times, it's best not to.
You guys look very warm. You just happen to be in a different country. Am I just feeling cold somehow for whatever reason?
I'm just back from a walk and it's a bit chilly and a bit wet outside. So I wouldn't claim it's warm in any way. Oscar, well, you've just joined. Whereabouts are you from, by the way? You've gone on mute.
On mute. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Gary. Yeah, from London.
Ah, okay, cool.
We've met many times.
This is a problem that I get to meet so many people, either in person or online, and it gets really embarrassing because I usually remember names and faces, but I just don't remember putting them together again. So
remember we were doing the documentary with Adam, and we were talking to you as well about it.
Ah, yes, yeah, that's beginning to ring some bells now. Excellent, good. Well, welcome back anyway. That's good news. So what are you up to at the moment then, Oscar? Anything interesting in the crypto world or anything?
Yes, apart from trying to short the market and make up for all the loss so far, I'm currently working on a platform where we've built out with Greenwich, where we tested a gamification platform, and now we're trying to bring in a tokenized gamification platform on learn to earn aspect side of things. So it's nearly there. I look forward to pitching on one of your sessions in due course.
Excellent. That's good. Well, you're always welcome on that. I'm surprised you're saying about the market doing badly as well, because I thought we were back about 85k of late on Bitcoin. And that I thought it was doing quite well now.
I mean, you make money when the market moves. If you know what you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's going up or down, just as long as it moves. So yeah, it's all good.
Excellent. That's good. Well, yeah, definitely. If you want to come and talk about your particular project at some points, always interested to hear about gamification and that type of thing, and
definitely
how it works in the crypto world as well.
Yeah, definitely in the crypto world. I mean, it's not as easy as in the UK with some of the rules and regs we need to work around about incentivifications and reward mechanisms, which makes it really hard. But the idea of being part of a community where credibility is transparent and you see people's, achievements, that's what's missing, and that's the angle I'm really working on that I'd love to see. So once we've got it tweaked, I'll give you a shout.
Excellent. Because I always find it interesting. I do see the whole crypto and blockchain space kind of like it keeps repeating cycles. It does feel a little bit kind of what was that TV film that time of Groundhog Day?
Yeah,
where you keep seeing and hearing the same thing all the time. Just being reinvented. So it's always interesting to see with each reinvention of something. Is there something new that's been added compared to the previous one? I'm sure in your case there will be. So
yeah, I mean, there's quite a few interesting factors. The one thing I found very interesting is there's no ideal first port of call places you can send newbies to, where there's a mass support network of credible people who are happy to have transparent exposure on their knowledge. They themselves pass courses and stuff. And if we can bring ecosystem partners in that can give real learn to earn quest tasks that actually train and educate people, that'd be really interesting.
That's really good because it's something I remember when I first moved into the space. It hasn't really moved on, that you didn't know who actually knew what they were talking about.
Yes.
I used to joke that when I first moved into it, you'd have people on stage at like meetup events in London, and I found half the time I did not have a clue what they were talking about, and I thought it was simply because I wasn't clever enough to understand it. But I realised a lot of the time it's because they didn't know what they were talking about anyway, and they were just blagging it. So anything we can do to improve things is great. And then you've got the challenge, obviously, of how do you accredit the accreditors? And I was involved in something around that a few years ago, and it became quite frustrating that some of the people who were saying, "Oh yeah, I'll accredit people in blockchain and this kind of thing," and you go, "Well, actually, do you know what? Whether it was like a Merkle tree or whatever it was," and they didn't know themselves. It's like, well, hang on, you're claiming to offer accreditation for something that I don't think you actually know much about yourself. So, which is why I position myself that I claim to know very little, but I'm always keen to keep listening and learning, and hopefully that helps others. So that'll be good. Great. Well, hopefully we can learn some more about that in due course. That'd be good. Just been joined by JT. JT's one of the other people who's been in the space for a while and has seen the cycles we go through where we keep reinventing things. Hey, JT.
Hey, guys. You're talking about something to earn, yeah?
Play to earn was one of the things, and the whole gamification. Yeah, that was certainly something. Oscar is involved in something on that. We're going to get him to come along one day and do a gone in 180 seconds session on.
Only if JT promises to watch and roast me and help me fine tune it afterwards.
I have a specific opinion about anything to earn,
Yes, especially in the UK.
It's not a very favorable one, so I'll stay quiet.
But I'm sure it'll be put to good use to hold Oscar's feet to the coals at some point, or feet to the fire.
Well, we are the product, isn't it? As they say.
Absolutely, that's all good. And we're joined by, is it Jakob as well? Hey, Jakob.
Yes, it's Jakob Lauritz. I'm from Sweden, here in Stockholm, and work for Handelsbanken. It's one of Sweden's largest banks.
Yeah, one of the independents as well, isn't it?
Yes, so we used to be. There's another large Swedish bank, SEB, but back in 1871 there was a disagreement on risk management, and we sort of broke free from them. So we are quite the thing we are most famous for is that we are very sort of risk conservative. We are the only, in at least Sweden and the Nordics, we're the only larger banks who have never ever been bailed out. Last time we took shareholder money was in the 1800s. But sort of our business model is very much built around this, that we used to say we don't sell products, we just find good customers and then they stay with us. And a common way we get new customers is that they're children of existing customers. But that said, we also very much, one of the things we're very much looking in the sort of, if we talk about sort of the crypto more sort of digital money space, is a lot about sort of digitalized deposits and how you can do that in a good way. After all, I mean, deposits is really the way we fund a lot of our balance sheet, and also the way you provide a lot of value to the customer. Fundamentally, I mean, the reason on a deposit, you pay customers not really that a competitive rate, but you can do that because you offer a lot of services. You offer that you have access to a debit card and so on. So the more services you can offer on a deposit product, fundamentally, the better pricing you can take out on it. And part of that, for example, one of the in Europe where we have a lot of sort of, there's quite a lot of borders. That means, for example, one of the things that is a big challenge is cross-border payments. I mean, if I am on a restaurant in Sweden and, we want to split the bill, there are apps in Sweden where it's very convenient. Instantaneously, you can transfer the money. And if I want to do the same with, 3 Nordic colleagues, it's a mess comparatively.
That's really interesting. And Handelsbank as well, I know in the UK, is one. It's a bank that's going against the trend in that it's retaining its local presence as well, and it seems to make decision making locally, which goes against what a lot of the other banks do.
It is very unique in the sense. Back in the 70s, we had a very legendary CEO, Jan Wallander, who came up with this idea that if you go into one of our branches and or if you go in almost any other bank and you want to take out a mortgage, the person you will meet will have more or less nothing to do with your credit decision. There will sit some automatic engine somewhere. The version we have in much more is that 95% of the time the person that does the credit decisioning is the actual person you meet, though we still provide a lot of sort of centralized support. So that person, when that person collects all your data and so on and sit and talk to you, they will still on their screen have that, we support them and say, okay, this and this is the risk, but they are the ultimate decision makers. And we find that changes customer relationships a lot. If you go in and you know that the person I'm sitting across is actually the decision maker, that's going to change how you guys have a relationship with each other in a very positive way.
So what's the general perspective around crypto? You're talking about
sorry, Gary, can I ask just a question before?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Isn't that how banks used to work?
They're very, I would say sort of, but even because the interesting thing is when we started with this model in the 70s, in theory, I think many people perceived that was the way it worked back in the 70s, but that's actually not how it happened. What you still would have, and we had that back in the 60s, for example, that you would sit down with a person, and a person was, I have to review it, and that person had a very little mandate, so it actually had to kick it up to his boss, who had to kick it up to their boss, and at some centralized place, a lot of the decision making was being made. And then it would go all the way back out. And that was one, we had a bunch of sort of bad credit losses back in the 60s and brought in the Jan Wallander, this our CEO, and that was his sort of idea how to change it. That he said that the idea is actually the more decentralized you make it, the more levels you have that actually discuss with each other, rather than if you centralize everything, there's just going to be more or less one point of failure for everything.
Yeah, I remember I was reading a while back about, I don't know in Sweden or Northern Europe, but in the US, I was reading a book and where they said that in the US, it was the decision was actually with the local branch manager, because they knew the city and the people who live in that town, so they know they are the guys who know if what the decision should be, and not some central place. And then, of course, things evolved, like you said, a little bit more going to central, and it became more centralized. So it becomes kind of a very clinical, and people don't relate to banks anymore.
No, so I fully agree. And I mean, this, I would say, is the core of our model, is that we want to have, because it's not only about the credit decision, but it's about that you, as a customer, then will have a physical person that you have then a relationship to. and that follows you. And we typically have, for example, when we have families, they typically share the same sort of banking representative. So that also means that, if we have a customer where, they made their payments for 30 years and now their children want a loan or want a mortgage or similar, we know that a lot of this is, that it passes down over the generations. So you're then much more willing to sort of extend credit to the next generation because you know that you could trust the previous one.
And I think it's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? When you look at it, comparing traditional banking as we know it now to crypto. And one of the big differences is that with crypto, if it goes wrong, there's nobody to go and hammer on the door and prod in the stomach and ask to go sort it out. And I've found it fascinating that's a weakness of crypto. That's the nature of decentralization, that there's no one to go to. And it was one of the strengths of the banks. The very fact that, as Jakob says, you had a relationship with the manager, you could go and you could see them. And so in the UK, at least, what the banks have been doing over the last probably up to 10 years is closing all that local capability down, which was their USP against crypto. So it's interesting and refreshing to know of a bank that is trying to book the trend.
Even worse than that,
local.
Gary, even worse than that, because now you're calling and he goes to some call center, I don't know, in Bangladesh, India, or whatever, Philippines, yeah? So it's kind of the guy's just reading a script on the screen. So all of that is removed completely, and I think that's why banking, in my opinion, is going to continue to fail. I don't see how it's going to be in the near future, but I know in medium term and long term, I think banking is destined to disappear, in my opinion.
But JT, I think you have a really good point in that if you make things into a commodity, you very much makes it replaceable. And once you have made it very replaceable, the only thing customers will think about is price.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly what's going to happen, and with crypto, like you said, Gary, I think it's an option, and there's going to be more mechanisms, different ways of actually, and there's already people coming up with solutions where you don't even need to talk to anyone, if you have a problem, because there's an AI, there's something there that can sort out your problem, and ultimately it brings the responsibility back to you anyway, You are the one, before banks appeared, you were in control of your own finance, Doesn't matter if it was under your pillow, under whatever it was, your money, you were still having control of it. So the problem is then with the commoditization of all of these, it actually creates even more problems for users, in my opinion. If you have access to your money directly without having anyone in between, there are problems with it, but I think with more solutions that enable you to solve your problems, then I think it's possible to cross that, In my opinion.
I was going to offer a further thing on that, which is the introduction of central bank digital currencies. If you take a look at the paper that the Bank of England has produced as part of their research, and it's quite timely with Jakob being in Stockholm, that Sweden was one of the leaders in the exploration into the e-corona and a government-backed digital currency. But the Bank of England paper makes hardly any mention of retail banks or high street banks. It talks about payment service providers. So ultimately, it's an absolute commoditized service. And when you think about it, if you think that the only primary purpose of a bank, for some people, is to hold what they think is their money, then you've completely commoditized the service anyway, haven't you? It's like, well, as long as you trust them to not take it away, it doesn't matter which bank it is. And that's where it's important for banks to come up with differentiators. And as Jakob says, the ability to either have the credibility over years through families or have additional services and products is what lends itself to that.
And I would also say a little bit going back to, as I said, the principle we work a lot with, as I say, is we say, we don't sell products, we find customers, we supply them with their needs. And the advantage there is that, if you say to a customer, they might come to you and say, I need a mortgage. It's like, sure, you need a mortgage, but you also need a credit card, right? You also need this and this, especially when we work a lot with companies. This is very much, they will often, like a construction company will approach us because they want a loan for building something. Sure, but you need payment service, you need leasing for your cars. And we always, that is one of the things we value. We need to have a sort of product suite wide enough that, you actually earn money on, that they say, okay, if I can gather all of these things and I have one point of contact, that actually saves me time, and that time is actually worth something.
And I agree with you, yeah, totally. And I think the banks, majority of banks out there, they're just saying this in a way. They should actually move it like upside down completely, the business model and the way they operate, because for them it doesn't matter if it's fiat or if it's crypto. Yeah, you guys just need to provide currency and payment services and all the services with the currency. If that currency is gold, so be it. But for you guys, for anyone that runs a bank, it's really about providing services to people. You guys don't care what the currency is, right?
Exactly, and it's about providing payment infrastructure, because it is because we offer that infrastructure, customers are willing to deposit money, and we can basically charge them for that. And I think a core thing for us sort of larger banks is that we need to sort of follow the technology evolution, because otherwise, why would a customer deposit money with us? They will only deposit it if we offer a sort of, some sort of convenience for them, compared to them just carrying around, bills in their pocket.
Yeah, and also, well, in crypto you have custodians, right? You guys are custodians of our money. It's as simple as that, and then you provide services for the money that you have a custody. So, if I think the world should evolve really, where it doesn't matter what you call it, but really it's custodians with rails and bolts and whatever, which are the services, that you guys provide, like you said. So I think there is a way for modern banks to adapt to cryptocurrencies very, very fast, because you don't care if it's a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or whatever is the currency, or dollar or whatever, Corona. You guys, you make money providing services to people. It's very simple. Right.
JT, just for the purposes of clarity and education and everyone's benefit as well, it's probably worthwhile mentioning, certainly in the UK, banks do not offer the custody of your money. And it's a very important thing that most people think they do. Banks are not the custodian of the money that you've deposited. You've effectively issued a loan to the bank and you're a creditor. And it's a very important
promissory note, right?
Yeah.
We spoke a lot about, but you know what I mean. The custodian, I understand what you mean.
Yeah. I just make it because it is a fact. It was one of the things that, as you begin to learn about crypto, and you learn about how crypto works, you also learn about how traditional banking and finance works. And that was one of the things that it still amazes me how many people don't realize. That when they deposit money into a bank account, it ceases to be their money. It's effectively they've issued a loan to the bank. Now, the end result is the same in that it feels like they're looking after your money for you, but they're not legally.
A good example, if we talk more about the sort of custodian model, the sort of narrow banking. The key reason why that model really struggled working is that, you would fundamentally have to go out and charge the customer for the service, because they still would need all the infrastructure, they will still need all the risk management. But, normally the way you circumvent that when you do the sort of promissory note concept, as you correctly point out, Gary, is that, since we can lend out the money, we can then sort of, that's the way we sort of get paid for the services we provide. I often use, I think a very fun example that was used in Sweden about sort of narrow banking is in Harry Potter, because Harry Potter's world has narrow banking. If you think about it, Harry Potter, he just deposited his golden coins in this vault, and the sort of elves that run it cannot really touch the vault. Which, on the other hand, means that when the Weasley brothers want to open their shop, there is no ability for them to get a bank loan. They actually have to go out and get the funding from Harry directly. So they have to do sort of the peer-to-peer lending way instead, because the bank is now narrow banking. So there was this fun example of explaining banking with a Harry Potter example.
Excellent.
Welcome to crypto.
But I love it as well, though. It brings in those things that it allows people to think about how things work, and they actually turn out to be different to what they were thinking. Annie, you put your camera on. Is that you coming in with a question?
Yes, I'd like to ask Jakob a question. So I know that in Sweden, you guys actually kind of get used to cryptocurrency quite earlier on, or blockchain in general. I'm curious as to whether that means the bank you work in actually has accepted cryptocurrency, in the sense that, what do I mean by that, is that if a customer wants to change or exchange from cryptocurrency to fiat currency and vice versa, is a lot quicker. What is the situation in Sweden?
Yes, I can say that in general, we do not offer as a service that you can come with a sort of external cryptocurrency, and we offer that, and the sort of limitations that exist for now, or the view has been that you have, of course, always the sort of KYC challenge. There are ways to deal with that, but it of course then requires sort of additional technology. That's one part. One part is also been sort of, again, the sort of relationship with the customer, that the argument have been that if we have a customer, we want to make sure that we have a sort of end-to-end, can offer the sort of end-to-end safety. One should be aware that a large chunk of our customers tend to, for example, be quite old people. So it has been essential to say, okay, if you have an access to doing something, we need to be able to have a good way to set that it's safe. But so my point is, the infrastructure doesn't exist today, but this is something we're looking into and trying to understand better, and seeing again how to sort of offer sort of additional service. So it's a little bit why decided to join today. It would be interesting to hear in a little bit, and we have, as I say, we are doing some pilots on the inside where we're working on seeing what we can do about this. But currently, if you come up to our branches, like, no, there's no Ethereum deposit way currently, unfortunately.
Well, what's the overall attitude of actually accepting the fact that you might want to make a payment into a known crypto exchange of fiat money? Is that permitted generally?
So no, there are a few niche players in Sweden that have experimented with it, but none of the sort of mainstream actors do allow that today, and it's been quite complex. And it's also been, for example, discussed. One of the alternatives discussed is that you would implement some sort of regulatory sandbox where under sort of certain circumstances would allow it, and our regulators have very strongly said sort of no to this. So for now, it more exists. I would say more of the whole sort of crypto space exists more internally, that banks sort of experiment with sort of, for example, different types of sort of deposit solutions where you can make tokenized deposits, for example. This is something we, for example, internally experiment with, but it has not really been possible for us to sort of hook up to sort of the external crypto space.
I think Gary was, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I think you were mentioning ramp on and ramp off, from exchange, so transferring money.
Yep.
I think he was referring to that, Jacob, not per se as you guys having the technology and hosting or whatever.
Exactly. So it's not about the being able to exchange Ethereum or Bitcoin or anything like that at all. It's more simply, if I want to make a payment to British Airways, for example, I want to catch a flight with British Airways. I've never had a problem with my bank paying making a payment to British Airways. Okay. If I wanted to make a payment to a crypto exchange to then do a transaction on their exchange in some way, then quite often that payment would have been blocked. And they would typically cite either, oh, well, you're dealing with crypto and we don't permit that, or we want to make sure it's not a suspicious transaction or whatever. So it was just a general resistance. And I appreciate most banks, certainly in Europe, remain hesitant at accepting payments into and out of crypto organizations. There's just a high level of sensitivity, and they'll typically cite KYC, AML, and any other three-letter acronyms, and generally will say that they're doing it to protect me. Even though if I then said, well, I want £5,000 to go to the casino tonight because I've decided I'm going to put it all on red, they're quite happy to process that transaction. So it's an interesting thing. Oscar, it might actually be a point at which your bank, as you say, is exploring things internally, but may not be quite ready for dealing with it externally yet.
I think in Europe we cannot do any more because of MiCA. Okay, so look, for you to have an account in a bank, there's all the MiFID II, MiCA, MiCA, whatever you want to call it. All those regulations are in place. Okay, so someone was telling me the other day, and I actually forgot to verify that. Basically, a couple of weeks ago, that banks in Europe cannot refuse anymore if you want to transfer. It doesn't matter, 5K, 10K, whatever you have agreed in a bank that you can per day to transfer, because there's banks that limit you, but you need to have agreements with them and so on. If the agreements are there, then you are able to transfer to any bank account. It doesn't matter if that bank account is from an exchange, or from a casino, from British Airways, okay? Because before, when there was no regulations, risk, and all of that stuff that we know, but now there are regulations in place, and they cannot refuse to do that,
I mean, you have the sort of fundamental payment service directive, which basically says that we aren't allowed to sort of refuse. I mean, anyone should have the right to open a bank account, and the logic behind that is that you are very much closed down in society if you don't have access to a bank account, and this can sometimes be because and also the regulators want to avoid banks to be sort of tactical about who we allow. I mean, I think a good example is that we're not allowed to have we're not allowed to have people that are, for example, on sanction lists because they're criminal warlords. Now, what you will see if you look at the sanction list is that it will basically write a name and very little information, and you get in a customer with that exact name. A very efficient strategy from a bank would just tend to say, okay, anyone who just have a name similar to this warlord, we just will not allow them because it's just efficient for us. And the logic is that person would then, even though it has really done nothing wrong, it's just been a little bit of a similar name to some other person, it would basically be impossible for it to get payment service. And this is the reason why you aren't allowed to do that, and why we actually because that costs us actually quite the money, because typically in some case, you will actually have to have a physical person that sit and review the case and say, no, we are certain this is not the same person, it's someone else, it's just that the name was very similar. And that is sort of what the fundamental payment directive sort of guarantees. Though it's important to mention, you need to provide a sort of bank account. You need to provide basic payment service. That can be quite basic. I mean, it doesn't have to be any credit. It can be a quite sort of low limit, and so on. But you still need to provide, some sort of basic service.
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this evolves, because I think in the UK at the moment, you've got the right to ask for a bank account, but that doesn't mean there's an obligation to provide one. So, but it's been interesting. Maybe we move on from that for now, because it's definitely an interesting area, Jaco, and it's really interesting to hear that banks are exploring this. Well, you mentioned about the wider thing as well about digital assets, I think. Was that right?
I mean, tokenized deposits. So this is something we have. This is one where we have really active work undergoing, and similar things like smart contracts is also something we have. Sort of a sort of innovation group that's sort of doing piloting on things before they go into active production, and sort of smart contracts is one of the things we're talking quite a lot about. That you could, for example, set up that. For example, in real estate transactions, set up very convenient way that if, for example, certain clauses were being fulfilled, automatically payment would be credited, for example.
That's a real shame that you weren't on the call last week, as we actually had someone who's delivering a 3-minute pitch around a real estate project using crypto.
Yes, that is the UK one. So I also know about the Swedish example. So I'm quite curious also. So what is the transaction timeline in overall for somebody who's trying to own something from the real estate? Jakob.
So that's a good question. That's a little more technical detail that I'm actually aware of myself. So apologies for that. But I know that and as I say, I still think that it's a little bit from being sort of production ready. But I know it's being tested out more on a sort of small scale. I mean, I would say our biggest sort of corporate customer group are real estate. This is sort of what we specialize on in both Sweden and quite as well a lot in UK. So we are looking into any sort of utility that we could offer for real estate companies would be incredibly valuable.
Yes, thank you so much, Jakob. I really appreciate it. I also noticed your background earlier that you're actually at work. I was thinking today is Sunday, even for Sweden. So I'm kind of curious why you're sitting in the office, though.
But I mean, I can just shortly reply to that. I mean, yes, I am actually at work because with end of the month approaching, currently sort of test running our sort of risk system. So I was anyway. That was also my logic. Like while I was anyway just waiting for it to churn through, I could as well be interesting to join this.
Okay. My last question for you, Jakob. One more. Is the Swedish equivalent to FCA? Are they also very stringent in terms of, for example, in Sweden, do you still have Binance and Bybit?
No, I don't think we have these. I mean, I can say that it's interesting because in Sweden, if you take the UK, you have the PRA and they have the FCA. In Sweden, they are one authority that is combined together. And that is often quite interesting because we talk quite a lot about that how do they stand? Because if you think about when you have a regulator, you have one arm which is focused on financial stability, and you have one arm that's focused on customer responsibility. And these are quite very, very different things. I mean, if you take crypto as an example, crypto isn't really a problem from a financial stability point of view unless it would become a really large product. But if you have a sort of customer responsibility perspective, even if it's a very niche phenomenon, it can still fall in scope of that. So I think that's also quite interesting that it's the same people that look at both of these two things in Sweden.
Okay. Wow. Thank you very much, Jakob. I appreciate this.
No problem.
Certainly a fascinating area. Anyone have any other questions for Jakob or anything? Or are we stress testing him now as opposed to stress testing the systems?
Yeah, but it's just fun to be able to, and as I say, super interesting to get to listen in, sort of. I mean, as I said again, this is a world we're trying to understand better. So any information is valuable.
Cool. Yeah. It's really nice to hear that attitude, and as I say, Handelsbank's quite refreshing as a bank because of their attitude of definitely being different from some of the retail banks I've seen in the UK. So that's good news. So great to have you here. Right, we'll open it up then. We're already past halfway through the hour. Anyone got anything they'd like to share? Anything they'd like to ask? Elena, good evening, by the way. Nice to see you joining us again. What's going on in the metaverse world? Anything new and exciting?
It's still developing. It's still in the development stage. Could I please chime in? I also wanted to express my appreciation of Jakob's knowledge. It's been I enjoyed listening to this.
Yeah, you're on the approved
Though
list.
I didn't understand much.
Thank you so much. But as I say, as I say, it's very interesting to sort of get to see this space in action.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Cool. So, any questions then?
Sorry, I don't. I wouldn't have any questions to Jakob because that wouldn't be my area. But I appreciate the fact that I can join and listen to interesting people.
Cool. Well, let's see if there's any other interesting people out there with anything to add at the moment. Because we've got several other people on. Anyone got any other interesting stuff that's going on, or are we going to talk about Bitcoin prices rocketing up and down again? Or the I was trying to think what the latest news was in terms of Ripple and the court action that's no longer taking place. I thought that was quite interesting. Anyone been following that?
Oscar can ask question. I think he went. Yeah, there you go. Keep going, Oscar.
Yeah, don't remind me of how many XRPs I dumped over the last few years. Regretting that right now. Where to start? I mean, obviously, following what's going on in America is not easy, and it's having so much unbelievable effect. And the last couple of weeks, especially, like, you know, everything's in a correlating squeeze. Nothing's really moving of any magnitude. We're still waiting for news out of America from SEC in regards to the Ripple case, and then now they're potentially talking about Ripple combining with the Fed and using the escrow. There's so much noise, and until something solid comes out of there, I wouldn't really want to make a call on anything. It's very confusing at the moment.
We do have our man on the scene in Stuart, who is on the West Coast. I don't know, Stuart, you got anything to add there?
I was just going to ask. Thank you. I was just going to ask what you wanted to know. At the moment, what Trump is trying to do is cause a recession, so that he will force the Fed to bring down the interest rates, which will make paying back of the amount of money that we're in debt a lot easier. It also makes US goods and services cheaper for other people to buy. So you're going to see a mild recession in the US, that's for sure. And the exchange rate is going to vary. I don't know whether it will vary much against the UK, because that seems to be sinking faster than a fat boy on a seesaw. But this is not time to get into political discussions.
Mm-hmm.
So I see XRP is that's going fine, and Ripple is in talks with the US government. I do know that.
Yeah.
Our chief economist is an advisor to Trump.
So the one that I was certainly thinking of, which popped up a couple of days ago, was this whole thing about the SEC dropping a lawsuit.
Yeah, that's gonna.
Yeah, but I don't know which specific lawsuit this relates to, because I seem to remember there were several ongoing, weren't there?
Yeah. I think you're going to find all of them are going to be dropped, per se. That's the current feedback we have.
Right. Yeah, this goes back to the whole, was it a security or not, which is the main one, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, really looking to trade the news on that one when it does get published.
I thought you trade the rumor, not the news. Isn't it buy on the rumor, sell on the news, if I remember correctly?
Yes. Well, you know, I mean, soon as the first few tweets start going out, SEC's dropped it. The so-called XRP army lunatics are going to go crazy there. So definitely on my notifications are set up for that one.
I thought that had already happened, though, because the announcement that it was being dropped was made a few days ago. And if you take a look at what then happened to XRP, so for those who don't know, XRP is the cryptocurrency that Ripple have, and XRP is actually different to Ripple, the company, although the connected one's the cryptocurrency, one's the organization. But there was this thing that XRP did start going up quite steeply at one point today. It went from 2.38 to 2.4, so that's what, a few percent or whatever. But I thought we'd already seen the market react. In fact, I would suggest that on the 19th, that's exactly what happened. It leapt up from 2.3 to 2.5, so that's what, 20% gain?
That was probably Brad putting all liquidity in.
Yeah. Or made a tweet or something, exactly as Oscar says, that there was something on social media, and that kind of swung it. So, Oscar, I thought the news was out and it was already now baked into the price. Are you thinking it may not be in some way? There may be more to come?
No, I think they're waiting for further news on the Fed agreements and stuff, and how it may be even cooked into the economy. There's a lot of confusing advice, but again, people are just trading the rumors that come out, and then, as you said, as soon as the news comes out that it was actually misleading, then it's a very easy 50% retracement guaranteed cooked in.
Okay, so that's
Who
more
cares
to do
about
with
XRP anyway, right?
yeah. So that's more to do with Ripple potentially being involved in some federal type things as opposed to XRP.
Yeah, I think that's the debate. Obviously, not everyone can invest into Ripple itself as a company. And everyone is hoping that the token itself, the XRP token, is going to be carried over in whatever deal may be made. But there's a lot of debate around that as well.
I'm with you. Now I understand that. Okay, cool.
Okay, that actually gives me a curiosity. Thank you, Oscar. I just kind of curious as to whether the American scene on cryptocurrency, blockchain, and whatever, does that actually also impact on Sweden, or is Sweden completely more independent? How does that work out? I'm curious.
I mean, I would argue that what we have tied in mostly with this with Europe, of course. So whatever, and if you think about sort of Swedish financial regulation, for example, it used to be, if you go back maybe 15, 20 years, Swedish regulation was very, very independent. Today, I would argue that most of the regulatory rules are set in Brussels and France by EBA. And then Swedish regulators primarily just tend to follow it. So that means that whatever, as we've mentioned, for example, MiCA is a good example. I mean, MiCA was a sort of an EU project. It was set out by EBA, and then it sort of more or less by default becomes, for example, Swedish law. So that tend to be sort of the big influence here.
And that's something I saw as well. I did some work with some regulatory things around Northern Europe, including Scandinavia, and Sweden's FSA. Effectively, it was a copy paste of a lot of the other regulators as well, because they're all based around European rules. The only differentiation was potentially the language.
Yes, and one should also be aware that if you are a small country, your body, I mean, they will struggle because they have to cover everything. I mean, we noticed that very clearly when we work together with them, that if you want to get something changed, the way you have to do it is that you rather have to work on sort of more from another educational point of view, because you might, if on a particular subject, they might have one or two people in the entire regulatory agency that understands that topic, and you work together with them. And this applies to almost any question. So I mean, that's always a challenge. I mean, it's very, very different if you compare to ECB, which is this huge machinery. And if you instead look at the sort of small regulatory domains, I mean, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, who all have their own agencies, they have a much sort of tougher time sort of keeping up. So they have to rely on basically copy pasting, because they would not be able to do everything on their own.
Wow. Does that mean then people in Sweden, for example, probably won't be too attracted to things like, meme coins, for example, like Trump coins or whatever it is?
I mean, I would argue it has. I mean, if you take, for example, if we take an extreme example, if we take when, for example, the GameStop event took place, that was really, really big in Sweden, and there was even got its own political dimension within Sweden, where certain political party advocated for it and so on. And I would say there is a fairly active sort of crypto community. There is a fairly active, but it's also a little bit how you look at the population. I mean, yes, there's absolutely a group of the population, as I guess in most other countries, that have had sort of good sort of bandwidth access for a long time, good sort of a very early sort of technology adoption. We were very, very early with getting fiber access, very, very early with getting very, very high internet connectivity and so on, and that means that you have a population part of a population that is very digitally native and that's attracted to this. But you also have, of course, a large segment of the population that, they have just now realized that they don't need to call their bank to ask how much is still left in the account.
Thank you very much, Jakob. Sorry for keep asking you so much.
No problem.
I'm just very curious. Thank you.
I think it's nice as well to get different perspectives of different countries. And to me, I've often thought of Sweden as being very conservative with a small c, very risk averse, but actually quite forward thinking with some things as well. And as I say, they were one of the leaders with the e-corona developments, which did eventually halt, I think, as well.
Yeah, it was I thought it was very, very unfortunate with the halt. I mean, the central bank wanted to push on, but it was basically a political decision from sort of the government to say no. And it was very much, which I think was very unfortunate. It was a decision to say, okay, somebody else should go first, which I don't really understand the logic in that decisioning. I mean, the idea is rather that, if you are first, you have an enormous opportunity to shape it the way you want it. I mean, if you are second, you have to copy what comes from guy number one. So I thought that was incredibly unfortunate. But I think just to mention shortly on the sort of conservative thing, I think one should really say, as I said before, that Sweden's a little bit split, because at the same time as we have these sort of old banks that have a lot of these sort of risk-averse customers, you also have a lot of sort of fintechs and other things in Sweden. I mean, I think one example is if you take, for example, Klarna, who is a Swedish company, who have really sort of, they have really this reputation in Sweden as the really sort of bad boy of the sort of finance sector. They often struggle, fighting with the regulators. And it's even more awkward, I used to have to say this as an anecdote, because actually Klarna's main office, they lease a building where they have that. And on top of that building is actually where the financial regulators have leased their office. So they meet each other in the elevators daily, we have heard.
That's interesting, because Klarna, again, they're very well known for their payment systems and their card and that.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. They are very, very different. Yeah, I think in the UK there was a similar situation for a while where the UK FCA was based in Canary Wharf, and I seem to recall one of the crypto exchanges that was nearby, it might have been Binance at the time, actually started putting massive advertising hoardings on the entrance to the Canary Wharf station, just to really drop the hint to the FCA at the time. So all good fun. So
yeah, I would just want to say that, although I know Sweden being quite forefront on this blockchain thing as a whole, the other country that is quite in the forefront of this is actually Estonia. So we don't yet have someone from the audience who is from Estonia.
But Estonia, I think, is super, super impressive. I mean, there's a number of things that they really have in their favor. And I think one of the mistakes people often make is that they view the three Baltic countries as the same. And we often say that Estonia is more of a little Nordic country than one of the Baltics. They have been very interesting with, digital. You can, for example, have digital citizenship in Estonia. And in particular, I think if you really talk about the long-term trends for Estonia, they have an incredible educational system. I mean, they have one of the best educational systems in Europe, in particular if you look at the cost efficiency. I mean, if you look at the sort of results students are able to get on standardized testing, compared to how much they spend on it, they spend almost nothing and they get enormous results. And that's going to long-term really matter.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, Estonia is quite impressive. So I think I would be asking that person a lot of questions if somebody actually come online here is from Estonia, actually. Saying
We'll maybe see what we can do at some point. JT's just thrown something into the chat, which I thought was worthy of talking about as well. Something a little bit different where we were talking about news and that kind of thing. I wasn't aware of this. This is quite interesting.
Yeah, happened this week. I was surprised as well.
Dropping the Tornado Cash sanctions, which is interesting. So for those who don't know,
the background is that there was some guys put the government or put the treasury in court last year, and there was a court case, and the judge rule against the treasury that it was illegal what they've done. Okay, so it was already November last year. I didn't know that happened as well. So when I saw this on the news, I was going through CoinDesk this week. I don't remember which day. I was like, wow, I didn't realize this has happened.
And it's going to be interesting as well for those who don't know. Tornado Cash provide a mixing capability, whereby it's a way of obfuscating the source and the destination of crypto transactions. And so regulators and law enforcement agencies don't like mixers because it hides potentially stuff that's moving around. And what was really interesting, this article mentions Roman Storm, who one of the founders behind Tornado Cash, who was being prosecuted for developing effectively the software. And it's pretty unknown for someone to be prosecuted for software in some way. And it seemed very unusual. I've seen it in the past where if you're doing software that has particular levels of cryptography in it, and so it may be considered a military weapon, in effect. I've seen issues with that in the past.
Yes, if you do that and you go against the sanctions and you provide that to countries like North Korea, yes, you will be nailed big time.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where that case goes now, as to whether if they've lifted the sanctions on the mixer, then does that mean that they'll also drop the case against the developer or the founder?
Yeah,
definitely an interesting one. Thanks
so
for that.
I think they have to, because if the judge said the treasury couldn't do this, then I think you're right, Gary. It's very weird that they go to develop, unless there might be things we don't know, isn't it? What he was doing in the back scenes, so we don't know.
Yep.
Something else interesting was that I saw was that Fidelity did file for on-chain U.S. Treasury funds. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So basically, they are they register they file for registering a blockchain-based version of their market fund. So the tokenizing treasury.
Okay.
It's super interesting space. It's growing very fast. Yeah. And they enter the race, and they are big, as you know. So and they are using Ethereum network for that.
Okay.
Interesting.
Just picking up on that, as you're saying about it. Yeah, we've got the launching a tokenized dollar fund. Is that the same thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, it was exactly that.
Okay.
Can I ask? I think it's super interesting. Sort of, what is the sort of, let us call it from a customer point of view, what is the functionality that this offers that they couldn't get already from having the bond itself? So sort of where is, if you were to sell this to a customer and not just say, it's nice because it's crypto, but what is the sort of added functionality that this provide?
I'll quickly throw in one, and then please others join the party as well. The whole benefit of a tokenized fund is the fact that you're then running it through a traditional product. So it's an ETF or it's whatever, and you're running it through a regulated organization for a regulated
old computer systems. Yeah, as well. Don't forget that, old computer systems as well.
Yeah. So Jakob, to answer your question from a particular customer perspective, it gives them an opportunity to have exposure to crypto whilst benefiting from all the traditional financial regulations. Is my view of something that is attractive on that. Don't know if others have other thoughts.
Well, it's also, if you think about what blockchain is, transparent. So who owns what is visible. Okay, it's also super secure. It's a ledger that is on-chain immutable, so hard to mess around with it, as you could do it on a normal computer system, especially old systems. There's a lot of faster, of course, if they want to do transactions, it's much faster. Yeah. So they basically are, I think they are using blockchain to track treasuries in a different way and probably more secure and transparent. That's what I'm guessing.
So
they have other plans. They might have other plans. I don't know.
So yeah, Jakob, again, as JT rightly points out, what this offers is a double benefit, really. That it provides exposure to the crypto market without the risk of doing a pure opening your own crypto account, setting up an exchange and that. But also because it's on chain, it also provides the transparency that a blockchain provides. So it means that you no longer have to trust your provider who says, oh, yeah, your funds are safe with us. It means you can actually go onto a blockchain, so in this case, Ethereum, and actually see that those funds are actually secured in a crypto wallet, sorry, crypto address. So it's quite attractive to some.
And they might have other ideas for, RWAs. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, these are, this opens a completely different space for them. I think there's more than this behind it. It's not all about using blockchain to track, and transfer, regular money transfer can be faster, cheaper, more secure, all of those things that we know. But I think there's a lot more behind this,
There could be. So what a great way to end this session, on a cliffhanger of where are they going with this? So something for everyone to think about. And unfortunately, we don't have time to explore it right now because we're out of time. So that's where I get the opportunity to say thank you to everybody for joining the call. Jakob, Oscar, anyone else who was new, thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. And for the regulars as well, for Elena, Annie, JT, and Stuart, who's escaped. But thanks for the questions. For those who are watching afterwards, don't you wish you'd have been on the call? Come on and join us in future. So anyway, have a great day, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Interesting as always. Be safe. Bye now.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.